Hi friends, I'm Abby and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be wrapping up all the books that I read in the month of December, so the final month of 2021. And overall I think I had a really great reading month. I read 8 books in total, which came to a total of 4,215 pages. I really enjoyed everything that I read. I really did. It was like a great reading month, and the thing is, it feels like the beginning of December was so long ago. So I went on holiday for the first 10-11 days of December. I went to the Dominican Republic and it was absolutely glorious, and I wish that I could be my past self because I had such a great time. And it's so dreary now back in the UK and I miss the sun. But so I had the first 10-11 days off and I did a reasonable amount of reading when we were there. And then it was Christmas, and so I had a really great month, and I hope you all did too. I hope you had a great Christmas and a great New Year, and that you had a lovely time if you celebrate, or if you do not, you were able to have some time off. Yeah, just a great reading month, which is really positive. I was like, I want to end the year on a high. I want to end the year with some positive reads. So I was really like trying to pick up books I knew I was going to feel positively about. I was like, please let it be a good reading month. So yes, 8 books, 4,215 pages. 7 of these books were fantasy and 1 was a sci-fi, so predominantly fantasy, absolutely fine with that. 6 of the books were adult and 2 were YA. And then my ratings, positive, I had 1 5-star, 2 4.5 stars, 4 4 stars and 1 3-star. So really positive, really just really enjoyed everything I read. I just enjoyed it all. And then in terms of the series, 4 of the books were standalones. 1 was a continuation in the series and 2 were finales, and 1 was the start of the series, which puts my on-the-go number of series at 23, which I'm very happy with. That is including books where I'm up to date and ones where it's my fault that I've not finished them, and there's not that many now that I can keep going with where it is my fault. There's only a handful. So I'm very happy with the progress that I made there, especially with what I did in the month of December. Let's just get into things. So I've done this, I made the pile in terms of series and standalones. So we're going to start with the series and then we'll go to the standalones, and that's how we're going to do it. The first book that I read in the month of December and the first series I finished ended up being Jade Legacy by Fonda Lee, the 3rd book in the Greenbone Saga. And if you've not read the Greenbone Saga, I would strongly recommend that you read it, because this is seriously phenomenal. I mean, I think everyone says this. I have not seen a bad review for this book, but if I can add to that praise, here we go, I'm adding to the praise, that this is an amazing series. And Fonda Lee really stuck the landing with this 3rd and final book. So the first book, Jade City, you are following the No Peak clan, and in the city of Janloon, which is on the island of Kekong, there are these warring gangs, the No Peak and the Mountain Clan, and you are following the different family members of this No Peak clan as they deal with the different political machinations that go on and the different warring skirmishes that happen between them. And then as the series goes on, everything just expands and expands. So that first book is very much focused around their lives in Janloon, in the city, and the children as they come to power and take over the power from their parents and their elders, and the sort of shift in the direction of the clans. And then the second book is it has a much broader scope. It focuses more on the world and how the ramifications of the situation with Jade in the city of Janloon affects the rest of the world and the rest of the countries, and everything is a lot broader. And then Jade Legacy, it really just it keeps going from there. It's multi-generational. You're following the children of the children, so you have so many generations working in tandem here. You have the scope of it with this whole world, the length of time. I don't know how she managed to go through so many years in this book without it feeling rushed. Time just passed. I was like, how is time passing? And it doesn't feel rushed. It was just so well paced. It was so well paced. The whole series is really well paced, I think, with these moments of intense drama where you're so invested in these characters' lives and seeing what happens to them and the pain that they face and the pain that they go through and the decisions that they make, and how you can see that sometimes you're like, why are you making these decisions? And they're such tough decisions that these people have to make, and the cultural significance behind these decisions and the ramifications that they have on their lives. I loved it. I think if you are a character-driven reader, you will enjoy this series, because it is so focused on these characters and their lives. And the thing is, you don't necessarily have to like the characters. I mean, I do like the characters, but they're all just so complex. Like, they're all so real, and you can see elements of yourself in them, even if you don't necessarily like those elements of yourself. And you can see, like, you can hate characters and you'll be like, why are you doing these things? And they're just there's so much depth to them. And I really liked the way this novel concludes. I did a like predictions video over on World Hoppers, and there were some things I got right, some things I got wrong, but there was a lot of twists in here, and a lot of like, the amount of shock, the amount of times I was like, Fonda, what are you doing to me? What are you doing to me? This book was so good. It was so good. And thank you, Patrick, for like hearing me, like seeing all my messages, being like, oh my God, this book, because it was a phenomenal conclusion. She really stuck landing. If you've been holding off reading this, you should stop holding off, because it is really, really good, and I would highly recommend it. Another series that I finished off, I don't have so much to say on this, I don't think, compared to Jade Legacy, where I had a lot to say, is Dawn Study by Maria V. Snyder. This is the final book in the Chronicles of Ixia, which I've been reading all year with my friend Vish from Books with V and our friend Sam. And we have overall, I think, really enjoyed the Chronicles of Ixia, but I think we found, well, both me and Sam found this final book to be a bit weak, especially for it being the final book. It has some quite repetitive plot points, which we had seen in some of the previous installments. And I think if this was just in the middle of the series, that would be fine. But this is meant to be the finale, and you're like, oh, could it just, it was just missing something. Like, for a finale, it just felt very cookie cutter for the rest of the series, unfortunately. I mean, I do really like the characters in this. I like our main character, Yelena. In the first book, she is a poison taster for the commander. You follow these different, like, these two sort of warring countries, one of which accepts magic and magic is thriving there, and that they train people that have magic, and then the other country which really represses magic, and anyone that has magic is killed. And so you follow that sort of dynamic, and it really expands from there. And I mean, this is the 9th book in the whole series now. It's sort of split up into 3 trilogies, so it doesn't feel so daunting as having like 9 books all together. But we have gradually read these over the past year, and I think overall we did really like it. Like, we really like the series as a whole, and we really like the characters. And in this 3rd trilogy, I do like the expansion of how one of the characters, Valak, who is the main love interest, you see his backstory. It's multiple perspective as well, which I do really, really enjoy. I was just a little bit disappointed in this final book. And then I continued in the Drowning Empire series by Andrea Stewart. This is the 2nd book, The Bone Shard Emperor. And I did really, really like this. So the first book, you were following Lynn, who is the daughter of the Emperor, as she learns about bone shard magic, which in this world, the magic system is based around bone shards, which there is a tithe, and a bone is taken from like the back of your neck here, and that bone shard is used to fuel these constructs which can do tasks. But if your bone shard is in use, then that drains the life out of you, and you are liable to die much sooner. You will then follow Jovis, who is a smuggler, and his search to find his missing wife. And then you have a couple of other perspectives, so a governor on one of the islands, because this is set in an archipelago, and so this is the continuation. I overall really enjoy this. I like the continuation of the plot and the expansion of the character relationships. This is very political as a book, I would say, and it deals with like the ramifications from the ending of the Bone Shard daughter, and what this means for the archipelago, and yeah, the different islands and the difficulties that they are facing, and the different power dynamics that they're facing, as you have sort of rebellions and you have these different factions that are coming along that want to take control. So it is very political in that sense, and it's also very character focused as well, that you're seeing different characters that meet and their relationships as they develop, and how these characters interact, and sort of as well the expansion of the magic and the sort of history of the world and the lore. I do feel like this sets up a lot for the 3rd and final book, that a lot of it is set up for that final book. So some of it did feel a little bit slower, I think, as it was dealing mostly with these character relationships and with the political situation. And then it was building. There is like a big dramatic scenes at the end of the book, so it is building to that, but I also feel like it is building towards that 3rd book. So it did feel like a little bit of a bridge, which is a little bit unfortunate because I would have liked it to have, you know, stood a bit more by itself, that it wasn't like the strongest book. I mean, I still really liked it, but I'd hoped that it would be like a 5-star book as opposed to being like a 4.5-star book, so in a similar position as that first book. But I'm definitely interested to see what happens with these characters and this world. I do find it really, really interesting. I think it's very, very well written. I really enjoy with this series that some of the perspectives are in first person and some are in third person. I find that's a really interesting dynamic, and especially because in general I much prefer a third person narrative. My like preferred reading experience is a multiple perspective third person. And that's generally what I like, but actually I'm much more invested in the first person narratives in here than the third person, which goes against my normal like reading preferences. I don't know if anyone else feels like that, if they have the same sort of preferences with first and third person, but I feel I have more connection to the first person narratives. But I think it's a very interesting technique as a whole to mix first and third depending on the perspectives, and I think I'd like to see more of that, because I think it's a really interesting writing technique. And then the final series that I read was The Mask of Mirrors. Not the whole series. I read the first book in the Rook and Rose trilogy, The Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick, which is a writing duo made up of Marie Brennan and Alice Helms. I really, really liked this. I think it was a very, very good start of a trilogy. I loved the world and the characters and the magic. So I mean, I really liked it all. I really did. And I can definitely see why Angela recommended this to me and why she's been telling me to read it like all year. And I did it, Angela. I did it before the end of the year. I did it. In this, you're following a main character, Ren, as she infiltrates the merchant houses. She sets up this con to be a long lost cousin of one of them in the hopes of being written into their sort of will and their being able to profit from them. And then you have a variety, like the cast of characters in here, there are quite a lot of characters in here, but they're also well developed. So you have like the family that she's infiltrating. You also have this character called the Rook, who is a Zorro type figure, who is a Zorro Robin Hood type figure. And then you have friends and sort of their dynamic. You have this character called Vargo, who is a rising figure, not necessarily sort of adjacent to the nobility, but he doesn't come from wealth, and he has gained his wealth through not the most cleanest of ways. So the nobles look down on him, but he is very wealthy now, and so the dynamic of him and the power that he has in this world. And I really liked the world. It's Venetian inspired, so I liked that setting with these rivers and the different islands. I really like the magic. The magic is something that I think I'm going to really enjoy on reread. That it is a little bit confusing, which is why I did deduct half a star. So I think I put this at 4.5 stars, because I did find things a little bit confusing as a first time reader, especially in terms of the magic, because there are sort of different magic systems within this, and so it's a bit hard to get your head around everything. But I did really like it, and I'm interested to see on reread how I feel about that, and I think as well, like the different political machinations and the politics going on. It's a little bit confusing, but I did really like it, and I'm very excited to see how it expands in the rest of the series. Yeah, some of the scenes in this book are like, I think some of my favourite scenes I've read all year. There's a scenes like towards the middle of the book which are just so compellingly readable and just so addictive, and so like, what is going to happen here? What is going to happen to these characters? There were some reveals and some shocks, and okay, I had an idea of who the Rook was going to be. I was like, the Rook is this person. I'm 100%, I'm so certain. I was like, I know who the Rook is. I know it. And I was like, and I was like, I'm ahead of the curve here. I'm so ahead of the curve. I know who the Rook is, and it's no one you're going to expect. I know who the Rook is. And then it wasn't who I thought it was going to be. I thought I was being so clever. I was like, what? What do you mean I've got to change my expectations? Then it was revealed. I was like, but this isn't who I've expected it to be. I had so many clues pointing to this person. I was so certain that I was like ahead of the curve and knew who it was. I was wrong. Maybe after reading Words of Radiance, where all my predictions were correct, maybe I was just too big-headed and expected my predictions to always be correct now, and they're not. So it was a bit of a like, oh dear, my prediction was wrong. my head's got around that. It took me a little while to get my head around my prediction being wrong. I was like, what do you mean my prediction's wrong? I was so certain of it. And realised that I wasn't correct and that I needed to rethink things. And then the implications of that, like I thought through all the implications of the person that I thought was the rook being the rook. And then I was like, oh, now I've got to think through the implications of this person being the rook. Okay. I really enjoy this and definitely interested to see what happens next. And I'm also interested in checking out some of the author's other works. And then for the standalones that I read Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I really like this one as well. Like, it's such a positive reading month, so positive. So this was the one sci-fi book that I read this month. I have really liked The Martian by Andy Weir, and I read Artemis and I wasn't a massive fan because I didn't like the female voice, because it didn't sound very female. But this really worked for me. This was back to the levels of The Martian. I think this might even be better than The Martian. It's a bit more outlandish than The Martian, but I really liked it, and I liked our main character. So you're following our main character, Rylan Grace, and he wakes up on this spaceship. He's lost some of his memories. The two crewmates that he's with are dead, and he's like, well, what am I doing here? What's the plan? What do I have to do? And him trying to piece together why he's there, what he's got to do, and his purpose for him being there, whilst also grappling with that he is alone in space, and he's like, well, I mean, I think we'd all be a bit, I mean, he handles it very well. So you follow that timeline, and then you also follow the timeline in the past as they build up to him being in space. It's hard to talk about because the majority of this book is a spoiler, and there's aspects of this which I would love to gush about, but I can't gush about it because it's a spoiler. So if you've read this book, then you probably know what I'm referring to, but one of the characters in this is my absolute favourite, but I can't talk about it. So there we go. For me, I really liked the scenes where he was in space and the science and the biology and how he comes to terms with his memory and him trying to remember things and the situation that he is in. Those scenes I really liked. I didn't so much like the past scenes. I mean, I liked them, they were fine, but because I knew, I guess, where it ended up, I was like, well, can we just... I was like, yeah. So I didn't enjoy those scenes as much. And so whenever we had a flashback, I was like, but I want to go back to the present. But I could definitely see like the value in them. But I definitely much preferred the present scenes when we were in space. So I did really like this, and I would definitely recommend it. If you've been hesitant to pick this up after reading Artemis and not liking it, this is much better than Artemis, and I really enjoyed this, and would definitely recommend it if you're after a sci-fi standalone. I read Little Thieves by Margaret Owen. This is a YA fantasy standalone, which is a retelling of the Goose Girl following the evil character that takes the place of the princess, and so we're following her. So I really like that sort of this anti-hero narrative that we have, and that you do start rooting for her because she is the perspective that you're following. You can see her motivations for why she's doing what she's doing. Overall, like I really liked this. It was a lot of fun. I don't feel like I've got loads to say on it aside from that I had a fun time reading this. I really liked the direction of the plot and the writing style as a whole. I found it very fun, engaging, and just a compelling read as a whole. And I was always invested in seeing what was going to happen next to our main cast of characters. There is a romance in here, and I didn't really root for it. I mean, it was fine. I mean, it's sort of predicted that you would have a romance in a YA fantasy, but I didn't feel like it was necessary, and I didn't quite see like the chemistry between the two characters. So that would be my one critique of it. That, I mean, I was fine with it. I wasn't going to be like, oh, why are these two people together? But I just don't think it was necessary. There's that, but I did really like the characters. I liked the growth that our main character goes through, because she is cursed at the beginning of the book that she will turn into Jules, as though she will turn into her greed, because it is her greed that has been fueling her. And so I did like her coming to terms with that, and the growth of her as a character, and overall like the dynamics of the friendship and the sort of the found family that is in this. So yeah, I definitely recommend it if you're after a fast YA standalone. I reread Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. I listened to the audiobook of this, and I really enjoyed this actually. I read this first back in like 2016, so it's been a few years, but I wanted to reread both this and Wallbreaker, so I started here. And this really stood up. Like, I was a bit nervous because I've heard, I mean, Elantris gets mixed reviews. I really liked this when I read this the first time. For me, I don't understand the mixed reviews. I'm like, this is really, really good. Like, it may be his first book, but it's still really, really good. I did enjoy the audiobook. I sped this up a lot faster than I normally do on audiobooks. Normally I listen at like 2 times speed, but I had this on like 2.5. Maybe, I mean, it was a reread, but that's faster than I normally do rereads anyway. In this, you are following multiple perspectives. You are following, I always pronounced it Serene, but it was like Serene in the audiobooks, which, okay. So you're following Serene, who is a princess who is to marry the prince of another kingdom, Raoden. And as she arrives for her marriage, she learns out that Raoden is dead, and well, at least that's what she is told. In actual fact, Raoden has been taken by the Sheod, which is a curse in a way, and he's been put into the city of Elantris. So 10 years prior to this, Elantris was the city of the gods. They had magic. They were sort of ethereal beings. Then 10 years ago, a situation happened and their magic sort of ceased to be, and they became sort of zombie-esque creatures, that diseased lepers type thing. And people are still people at random are taken to before they became these Elantrians, and now they've become these diseased Elantrians. So he has been taken to be a diseased Elantrian, and as such, as everyone refers to him as dead. So that's what she goes in, presuming that her husband has died. Unfortunately, the marriage contract that's been drawn up says that the marriage is still valid, so she is a widow now. And then you also follow a priest and his designs for what he wants the kingdom to look like. And I really liked it. I really liked seeing Raoden's exploration of Elantris. I really liked Serene and her sort of trying to manipulate the political situation within this empire, and all the characters. And I mean, I really did like it. I liked seeing the Cosmere references throughout this. I mean, when I read this years ago, I'd only read Mistborn, whereas now I've read quite a lot more Cosmere books. It was really great seeing some of the links. When Hoyd was in this, I was like, it's Hoyd! I was like, literally stopped the audiobook, like, Hoyd spotting! And then, I don't know if this edition has it, because I got this quite a few years ago, but the audiobook that I was listening to had like some bonus scenes in it, and like a bonus chapter, and I was like, oh wow, ramifications here. So I definitely really enjoyed seeing those sort of Easter eggs. Maybe it's not so like grand and epic in scope compared to like The Way of Kings, but I think it's a very solid entry in the Cosmere still. And then the final standalone book that I read was The Ghost Bride by Yangtze Chu. I guess this is weirdly in juxtaposition, because I read these at a similar time, and they both follow marriages to dead people, which is a bit of a weird thing that they both ended up with that. This I really liked. It was a bit bizarre. Yeah, it was bizarre. I really liked the writing style in this. I knew from like the first chapter that I was really enjoying the writing style and the sort of whimsy and the bizarreness of it. I wasn't like 100% convinced on the plot at the beginning. I was like, I don't quite know where this is going. I don't know if I'm convinced by what is happening here. But I did start to really get into it as the story went on, like, especially in the second half. I was like, okay, I'm really invested now. So in this book, you are following Lilan in the 1890s in Malaysia. And I really liked the juxtaposition of different cultures within this book. So it's set in Malaysia, but you have Chinese influences within. You have like the British that were there, you have the Dutch. So you sort of see the diaspora of different cultures within this community, as well as the different cultures that go into making this community and the different cultures that are explored. So I really did like that aspect of this, and seeing the different like way that they treat life and death. Interestingly, a ghost bride was a real thing, and that people did end up being married to dead people, which is a very bizarre concept. Generally, this was supposedly used, like the concept was used for like concubines to make them a wife, or a mistress to make them a wife, so that they would have more political standing. When I looked into it afterwards. So I found that really interesting. And then this does take like a fantastical turn as it goes on. I wasn't too sure if this was going to be predominantly historical, but it does, I guess it's quite fantasy historical, as you follow Lilan in like the realm of the dead. And it does explore like different realms of the dead and different like theories for where people go after they die and what happens to them. So yeah, I have never read a book that was focused around Malaysia and this culture or this history at all. So I did find that really interesting to explore this history and what was going on in the 1890s in that part of the world, because I'd never I hadn't really looked into it before. Those are the 8 books that I read in the month of December. It was a very, very great reading month, really productive, lots of great books, really positive thoughts on all of them, and I feel like I ended the year on a high, thankfully. Did you have a good reading month in the month of November? Did you read some favourites? Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my future videos. Bye!